Hi, morning everyone. Welcome to episode 22 of the Knitting Expat Podcast. My name is Mina and I'll be your host today. Today is the 10th of August, it's a Monday, as usual. Welcome to all new and returning viewers. Thank you so much for checking me out or coming back and hanging out with me for a bit. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch, really. It's great to have this platform to be able to communicate with you guys, and just wanted to say thank you for that. And places you can find me online. So as I said, my name is Mina. I am Mina86 on Ravelry, Mina Phillip on Instagram, and you can find the group on Ravelry's Knitting Expat Podcast. And I sell project bags on Etsy as Mina Makes is the name of the Etsy shop. And show notes can be found on knittingexpat.wordpress.com. knittingexpat.wordpress.com. Had to think about that for a minute. But I have links for all of those and everywhere that you can find me below the video on YouTube in the description box. I have it in the thread for the episode on Ravelry. I have it in the main bit in the group on Ravelry. I pretty much have it everywhere, so it should be relatively easy for you to find me depending on where you're watching this. So yeah, feel free to come follow me on Instagram and chat and whatever. I love hearing from you guys. And yeah, thank you to everyone who sent me messages this last week. It's been really lovely chatting to you guys. So in particular, I wanted to say thank you to Julia of the Happy Knitting Podcast, and she and I have been chatting a bit on the Ravelry forums and on Instagram recently, and she's recently decided to start a podcast. I've literally just done one episode and I think it went really well. I really liked it, and I definitely think you guys should check her out. She's 22 from Germany. She's still a student, but she knits, and she's recently started spinning and having a go at hand dyeing her own yarns. So I think she's doing pretty well for herself. She's doing really interesting things, and I think you should go check her out. She's really sweet. I also wanted to say a quick thank you to a couple of people who sent me patterns this week. Well, actually, one sent it to me last week. I just forgot to mention it in the podcast, so I'm really sorry. I didn't actually get permission to say your name on the podcast, so I'll just say your name, but I won't say your Ravelry name. So Victoria, thank you. She gifted me the Gretel hat pattern by Isolde Teague, which is really beautiful, sort of cabled hat tam style. Sorry, I can't speak today. Style hat pattern, which is really beautiful. So thank you so much. And also thank you to Caitlin. Sorry, 1 second, I just had a moment now and I've just realised. There we go. Caitlin Madday, who is Mint Rain on Ravelry and Instagram, she gifted me her lovely pattern through the Standing Stones mittens. And it's a worsted weight mitten pattern, which is really beautiful. And so thank you so much, Caitlin, for that. I will have to knit those up when I go to Iceland. I might even knit up a pair for Perry. We'll see how it goes. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to Kate from the UK. And I appreciate what she sent me, but it wasn't good news is what she gave me. I guess, it's not terrible, it's just annoying. But thank you very much, Kate, for bringing it to my attention. Someone has decided to copy my videos and re-upload them to YouTube as their own, and I'm not entirely sure why people just choose to do that sort of thing. I know Sally Jane from the Pink Hair Girl podcast had a similar issue a few weeks ago. It came to her attention that someone had copied her videos and re-uploaded them onto YouTube, so I actually had to go back and find that episode and figure out what she did. So I figured it out in the end. It took me some time, but I've reported it to YouTube now, so fingers crossed those will be taken down soon. But it's just, why do people do that? I don't really understand the logic of why would you want to re-upload someone else's video and pretend it's yours. Anyway, they all seem to have been uploaded in the last week or two, so it's a relatively recent thing. Oh well. Right, so moving on swiftly. The outline for this week's episode, we cover some finished objects, some works in progress, and needle adjacent. There's a lot that's needle adjacent, so it's got its own section this week. Knit along news, sewing / Mina Makes sort of Etsy shop news, acquisitions, questions and answers, and a weekend review at the end. So the more knitting related stuff will be at the beginning, and if you're not interested in the more chatty stuff, then it'll be later on in the episode, so you don't have to hang around for that if you don't want to. So, kicking off with finished objects. The first thing I have finished this week are my Barenville Pond Along socks. So, I'll get a bit closer. There we go, just plain vanilla socks. The Fish Lips Kiss heel. I did a 1x1 twisted rib for the cuff, which I really like. And the yarn is Barenville Barefoot Sock, 100 grams, 400 meters in the Pond colourway. And as it so happens, Vicky of Barenville is having a pond yarn update, I believe tomorrow. And sorry, let me get my thoughts straight. Regina from the Herbstblatt Regina podcast is hosting a pond along, knit along at the moment. So this is my entry for that, my pond socks. And just a word of warning, Vicky's yarn is beautiful, it's really soft, it's 80% merino, 20% nylon, but it is very plump fingering weight yarn. So even on 2.25mm needles, I probably could have knit them on 2.5s and it would have been fine. But on 2.25mm needles, I only needed 64 stitches, and even then it's not loose, but it's comfortable, it doesn't feel too tight. I actually started out with 68 stitches, you can sort of see here at the top, in the cuff, and then for a few rows. And then I actually tried it on and realised it was going to be too big, so I decreased down to 64, which you could barely notice it when you have the sock flat, but even when you're wearing it, it actually works out quite well, because like most people, my calves are a bit bigger up my leg than they are, my leg is wider halfway up the calf than it is at the ankle. So having a couple more stitches at the top proved to be a good fit. And as for the foot, I did do the foot a bit shorter than I normally would, because I found that my socks do stretch out quite a bit after I've washed them and warmed them. But having said that, I probably could have added a couple more rows. They fit fine, but they are a nice snug fit. But like I said, I could have added a couple more rows, but I'm happy with how they've turned out. And I have one sock that has more speckle than the other. That's just how the skein was. Half the skein had more speckles than the other. But that's fine. And I'm really happy with how these socks turned out. Got a nice long leg. I do my sort of go-to sock formula now, I guess, is about 20 rows ribbing, whatever kind of rib I do. Then I do 80 rows for the legs, so it's 100 overall, 100 rows. Then I do either a Fish Lips Kiss heel or a heel flap and gusset. Then I knit the foot, and I do a rounded toe, which is by far my preferred toe. Just think it looks nicer. And it fits me really well. So those are my socks. And I'll have to still need to post my FO picture into the FO thread for the Pond Along Knit Along. So if you haven't joined in and you do have a skein of pond, then jump in. You don't have to knit socks, you can knit whatever you want, as long as you use that colourway. And if you don't have a skein, check out the update tomorrow night. And my next FO I'm wearing. Yay! I'm so excited to show this to you guys, because this is my next shawl design, and I've called it For the Love of Rainbows. I was trying to decide on a name for this one for a surprisingly long time. I don't know why it took me so long to come up with the name, but I don't know even how it came to me. I was just sitting there thinking of something. I was like, For the Love of Rainbows, and I was like, perfect, that'll work. For the Love of Rainbows is the name of this shawl. So as you can see, it's a garter based shawl. I'll take it off and show you. Actually, you know what, first I'll tell you what the yarn is and I'll take it off. So the rainbow is a rainbow gradient by Unbeliever Wool, and it's called Rainbow Black. and it's a merino nylon sock blend. And this was actually a sock blank, which was given to me by Little Bobbins, Danny of Little Bobbins, of the Little Bobbins podcast. Seriously, words are failing me today. In a swap that we did earlier this year. So thank you very much, Danny. I actually scaled it up into a hank and washed it and soaked it and dried it to try and get as much of the kinks out as possible, because I was going to be knitting it with Cascade Heritage sock. This was in colour 5681, but it's all like this neutral beigey cream colour. Because I was going to knit it with another yarn that wasn't from a blank form, I was worried that the kinks in knitting it from the sock blank was going to affect the tension too much. But it seemed to have worked out okay after washing, and actually washing it was a good thing because it let me know whether or not the colours were going to run, and the colours did not run once. So I was more than confident about knitting this with the natural colour without worrying. The Cascade yarn is 400 meters in 100 grams, and the sock blank was 425 meters to 100 grams, so very slight difference in the thickness, but it worked out well. And so you start at this end, and you can see, and you go, it's a shawl knit on the bias. You go, and it just keeps going, and it keeps going, and this shawl is absolutely humongous. It's not massively deep in the front, so it's sort of a good size for wearing around your neck, bandana style, kind of like how I normally wear my shawls. But it's got longer arms, which means it actually wraps around your neck a total of about 3 times. So let me just show you. You get one, so you got 2 wraps there, and then you get a 3rd wrap with this, like that. So you can wrap it really nice and snug around your neck to stay warm. You can just wrap it around like once and have long arms dangling down the front, which also works. But this is slightly different from the usual sort of hitchhiker style bias shawl in that it is perfectly symmetrical. If you fold it in half, it's perfectly symmetrical in shape, and I really quite like that. Just the increases are worked slightly differently. Ooh, don't know how well you can see that point, and all the way to that point. Sorry, I've got my hairs are stuck in this scarf now after having to put it on, but you get the gist. And so yeah, and then so you start with thinner stripes, but more stripes. So you got 5 stripes in thinner, and then the stripes start to get thicker, but you have fewer stripes. So it goes from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, and then the last one is one thick stripe. And I could have actually knit it for longer because I had more of the black left. I did actually take out some of the pink at the beginning and a bit of green in the middle because I was worried that I wasn't going to get through all the colours. But I could have knit the black, I could have knit this last stripe longer, and you can, the pattern is written such that, you know, you can pretty much knit this last section longer if you wanted to. And then you just switch back to the cream to do a couple of rows and then the bind off. And yeah, I really liked it. I really liked how it knitted up. I'm really happy with it. It's a very easy pattern for a beginner. It's interesting. I found actually it was really fun to knit, and it was quite hard to put down. It was, I think I mentioned to somebody on Instagram, I think it was, I can't remember who now, but I mentioned it to someone on Instagram. I was like, it's a lot like knitting socks. And I didn't go beyond explaining that. And then I realized it probably doesn't make much sense to people, but it felt like knitting socks because it's like, you know, just the next stripe, and then you get to like the eyelet section, and it's like, okay, we'll just get past this eyelet section, and then it's like, okay, well, just the next stripe. And in that sense, I think it's really sort of interesting and fun to knit. It's not it's not miles of garter stitch. The one complaint that I've heard a lot that people have had with like patterns like the hitchhiker, which is a beautiful pattern and I want to knit one, but the thing that I hear like is it's just like, you know, you get to a point where it's just you're bored of garter stitch, like you're just bored of the knitting because it's just all the same thing. So whilst this is all in garter stitch, you're that's the back. You're constantly changing what you're doing. You're changing colours, or you're just, by the time you get to the end of this section, if you're bored of the garter stitch, you then switch to eyelets, and then by the time, by the time you get bored of the eyelets, or before you get bored of the eyelets, you're suddenly switching out to do something else. And then if you work with like a gradient yarn, or you could even do it with, I think it would look really good with like a heavily variegated yarn as well, or mini skeins. You could easily use mini skeins for the stripes as well, and pair it with a nice neutral or some sort of complementary colour. I think this would be a really good use, or a really good idea for something to knit with those incredibly crazy coloured variegated yarns that we all love to buy but never know what to do with afterwards. So yeah, I actually have another one in mind that I want to knit, but I am waiting for the yarn to go with the one I have in mind to use it for. I have a yarn in mind in stash that I want to use it for, and I have another one that I've ordered from Maya at the Wool Barn that I had in mind to use with the one I already have, to make another one of these, because I do love this very much. It's just bright and colourful, and basically I'm waiting for Perry to go to London to bring the yarn back for me because it's at my parents' at the moment. Yeah, I'm gonna take it off now because it is quite warm in here. But yeah, I wanted to show you that. Jeez, now it's stuck to my head. But yes, that's the shawl. It's currently being test knit by a few people, by some lovely friends of the podcast. And yeah, I'm hoping to have this out soon, hopefully by the end of the month. So yeah, keep your eyes out for that. And I'm so excited. I have a few other patterns in the works, but I'll talk a bit more about that coming up. So that's my second finished object, and I am so incredibly excited by it. It's just to give you a bit of an idea, it's knit on 4mm needles, so it's a nice sort of loosish gauge for fingering weight yarn in a shawl, but with garter stitch you kind of need a looser gauge anyway. And I used less than 100 grams of each of the colours, but you do use more than 50 grams. I think of the beige I used around 300 meters, and of the rainbow I used around 365 meters total meterage. So it gives you a rough idea. So it's a sizable shawl. It ends up being about 2.6 meters wide and about 35-ish centimeters deep in the deepest point in the middle. Jeez, seriously, words just not working for me. But that's what that is. And with that, my current stash total, as it were, is now at 10,590 meters. So I think I'm doing okay. I've crossed the 10,000 mark. So that should be fun. I will need to actually go and enter that now. That's it for finished objects this week. I don't have anything else to show you. Those are my two FOs. I'm really happy with those. So moving on to whips. My first whip in one of my prototype Mina Makes bags is my Viajant, or Viajant. It's getting big now. This thing has grown. I'm knitting these on 3.5mm needles. Ooh, this is the front. It's all squished up, so I can't really show you the true size, but it is getting pretty massive. And this is how much I've knit since last week. That's where I was. Here is where I am. I can give you an idea of the colours. This is being knit up in, there we go, it's a bit better. It's being knit up in Woolnise lace yarn, and it's one of their weird different colourways, and it's called Grapes for Sherry. Oh, it's a bit washed out, that's a bit better. There we go. And this is what's left of the cake. It's still pretty big, but it's definitely smaller. definitely smaller, and it's now down to the bit where I was able to wind it up to on the ball winder before I had to take it off and do it by hand because it got so massive. But I am now down to, my goal was to get down to 175 this week. I'm now down to 169, so I managed to go past what I was aiming to, which is good. And this next week my aim is another 50 grams to get it down to 125 or 120 if possible. We'll see. I'm going to go down to 75 grams before I start the border because I had a slightly bigger skein than usual. Usually they're 300 gram skeins, but mine was 325. So I think the pattern by Martina Bem, if I didn't mention that, is says you knit up to 60 grams left and then you start the border, but I'm going to start it at 75. I don't mind having a little bit left over for my blanket. And so yes, that's the Viajante. Then my next work in progress is a test knit that I'm doing for Maria of the Stitched in Sweden podcast, and that is the Meristem mittens, the Meristem mittens pattern. Also another one of my Mina Makes bags, prototype bag. That's being knit out of this beautifully tonal sort of lavender colour, and this is a single ply, I believe it's hand spun and hand dyed yarn from Chile. This was sent to me by the lovely Nina of the Fuzzy Love Knots podcast in a swap that we did, and this is how far I am. They're actually both at the same place. I've just got this one on holders. I was knitting these 2 at a time, but the yarn is so sticky, which is fine, it's not an issue, but it just makes working them 2 at a time quite difficult. And because my highs are the 4-inch ones, they're slightly shorter tips, it's harder to work them 2 at a time together. So they're both at the same point. I'm knitting them concurrently, so I'm doing a few repeats on this and then switching them over and doing a few repeats on this to keep them at the same place. And yeah, I'm really loving how they're turning out. They look beautiful. Oh well, you can see that there. And even though this yarn has quite a halo to it, it's quite fuzzy, you get really good stitch definition. It's really interesting. So I'm going to put this on and show you what it looks like on. There you go. Get a better idea of that. So I've not got far to go. I think I've got a few more repeats of the pattern before I can do the decreases at the top, and then I've just got the thumbs. So it should be finished by next week. So yeah, I'm really enjoying how this is knitting up, and I love how tonal the yarn is, the colours. I don't know how well you can see that. It's very subtle sort of variegation in the colours, which is lovely. So I can get this off now without damaging it. There we go. So yeah, that's knitting up lovely, and I'm really enjoying it. And so yeah, that's the Meristem mittens by Maria Monska. And that pattern should be released, I believe she said to me, beginning of September, that sort of time. And that's being knit on 2.75mm high sharps, interchangeables. And yes, so my next work in progress is in this lovely project bag made for me by Tonya. We did a project bag swap a while ago, or relatively recently. And this is one of the bags she sent me. And I am knitting finally got round to knitting the Rain on the Windows sock pattern by Catherine Stephen, who's also the Girl with the White Rabbit. Girl with the White Rabbit on Ravelry and Instagram. And this is how they are looking so far. If I can get them up. So I'm knitting these 2 at a time. I did adapt the pattern ever so slightly. So I'm only knitting them on the front. I'm doing plain stockinette on the back. And I just did a regular 1x1 rib at the top. And as you can see, it's a really nice sort of texture. If I move it along and put it on my hand, you might be able to see it better. There you go, you can sort of see that texture pattern a bit better there. It's really interesting sort of slip stitch and garter pattern, which is working up really nicely. And I wanted to keep one side of it plain stockinette because I wanted to also, because this is a gift, I also wanted the person I was gifting it to be able to see the pattern in plain stockinette as well as the texture. So, and the yarn is Alstom Step with the, trying to find and it's colorway number 48, 0048. It's their standard 75% wool, 25% polyamide, pretty typical of most sort of German brand yarns. But I really love working with this yarn, it's so soft, and that's the aloe and jojoba content in it. This is what it looks like caked up. I have my 2 cakes. One looks bigger than the other only because it was wound tighter. And yeah, so those are my next pair of gift socks that I'm knitting. I mentioned a while back that I'm knitting a pair of socks for all of my girlfriends for our little group, and there's 6 pairs of socks I need to make, and this is number 3. So it shouldn't be too bad. I should manage. My deadline is November, or towards the end of November, so I have plenty of time. Not a problem. I figure if I just do 1 pair of gift socks for my friends each month, then it should be, I'll get there. So that's that work in progress. And my last work in progress I have to show you is my blanket, because I haven't shown this to you guys in a while because I hadn't worked on it in a while. But this week I finally put some squares into it. So, starting with these 3 squares here. There we go, that's better. All the ends are in the way. So these 3 I've added in, and these 3 were all given to me by the lovely Katrina, who is Nelly Knits on Instagram and Ravelry. And now I'm trying to remember what these yarns are. This one I know is a Noro sock yarn, which is very interesting to knit with. This gives an interesting, nice sort of texture to it. This one was a German brand, which I cannot remember the name of. And I think this was a Lana Grossa yarn. So that was those 3. And then on this side, on the section where I'm adding the yarns that I've knit with, personally knit projects with, I have added 3. So I've added my pond. I have to add the pond. Then I've got the Chilean Corriedale, which I'm knitting the meristem mittens out of. And this is the Lana Grossa Peak that I knit my friend's socks out of, the blueberry waffle socks. So that's those. So now this side has, oh, if I can get it up, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see. The side where I'm knitting all the pieces, all the squares out of the yarns that I've used myself, has now got 40 squares on it. And this side, which I'm starting to go off this way, has now got 13 squares on it. So that's coming along nicely. And what I'm doing with that is I'm keeping that as my later in the evening knitting, sort of like when Perry gets home from work and we're sat on the sofa just watching. Because when he gets home from work, we tend to have dinner and then he has to go and study or do something, generally just studying at the moment. So whenever he's finished studying, usually we have like half an hour or so before we have to go to bed, so we'll watch an episode of something, and that's when I'll sit and knit a square under the blanket. So I think that kind of works, and it's a good way for me to make sure I actually keep knitting on the blanket. So I think that's probably what that will be from now on, sort of like late night TV knitting. I say late night, not really that late, but anyway. So next section is needle adjacent. And first things first, I have to say that my ball winder died a very dramatic death this week. You hear that? yeah, it's broken. Perry said he could take it apart and try and fix it for me, but frankly, I've hated this thing pretty much from day one. It is the worst thing. It never worked well for me. This was always loose, so I had to hold it. The actual winder didn't wind my cakes properly. It would always I'd always end up with some sort of yarn bath at some point or another. Anyway, so I decided to have a bit of a backstory before this broke. I decided to have a yarn winding session at the weekend. I had a bunch of yarns picked out for upcoming projects, and I was like, okay, well, I'll just cake everything up now so it's all ready to go and I don't have to worry about it later. So I managed to cake up the first thing, which was this beautiful yarn by Fiberspace Vivacious 4-ply in the Tweed Imps colorway. This is one I picked up at iKnit Fandango. This is the color. It's sort of like a really beautifully sort of variegated, reddy, rusty, not rust, sort of like a maroon, burgundy red and purple shades. I don't know how well that colour will go. Sort of see the tonality there. It's really lovely. But you can see what a mess it made of my cake. Like, this is not what a cake should look like. And it's sort of coming up in the middle. Anyway, I just about managed to get through this in one piece. Then I started winding up the next skein, which was, where is it? I'm trying to find it. This one, which is a Cascade Heritage Silk in 5681. Again, it's the same beige colorway that I've got in this For the Love of Rainbows shawl, but this is the silk merino blend, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, superwash wool and mulberry silk blend, whereas the other one is superwash wool and nylon. Yeah, I just about managed to get through this, but it was in an even worse condition than this one, so I had it earmarked to re-cake it after I'd finished winding everything. And then I was winding this skein up, and this is Baby Long Legs, semi-precious, 50% silk, 50% superwash merino in the colorway Raspberries and Cream. Such a beautiful color, so beautiful. And this was gifted to me in a swap that I did with Chrissy from the Stitch Together podcast. And halfway through skeining this up, this popped off the ball winder and it was on the floor. My yarn was getting in a tangle. I was just like, what on earth is going on? And then this was like 2 minutes after Perry had gotten home, I think it was, or I don't know, he'd popped out for something, I don't know. Anyway, he got home and he was like, okay, I'll try and, he said, oh, let me have a look, I'll try and fix it. So he managed to somewhat screw that end back onto the ball winder, and I kept winding, it popped off again. He came back and he screwed it back on, and after the third time I was like, you know what, this it's dead, I don't like it. It's pretty much chewed up my yarn, and I was like, if I try anymore it will actually ruin my ball, my yarn. So I took it off, I sort of hand wound the rest onto the ball winder from the skein, from the Swift, and then I sort of took this bit off when I sat on the sofa and hand wound it into a ball, because I was like, the cake wasn't even usable in the state that it was, so I had to wind it off into a ball. I ended up rewinding this one into a ball as well. So these two will be becoming something very special. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you more about that right now. Yeah. So it's becoming something very special very soon. That's all you need to know. The Fiberspace yarn is going to become a hat pattern. That'll also be coming very soon. And then the next yarn that I had to wind up by hand was this beautiful skein from Maya, the wool barn that I've got, which is, it's her rustic sock, high twist, 80% BFL, 20% nylon, 365 meters in 100 grams, 400 yards. Ooh. And what was the colorway called? I can't remember now. I didn't write it down. But it's really beautiful, sort of like shades of green and sort of a turquoisey green color. So this is going to become a sock design. So I think I mentioned last week that I had an idea for like a collection of patterns. So that's what the hat and the socks are going to be part of. And I also have a shawl, which is going to be the main design for the collection. But I'm still waiting for the yarn for that one to come through. I'll tell you more about that when it arrives. And one other thing that's needle adjacent at the moment is a pair of socks for Perry for his birthday socks. Again, I had to hand wind this because the ball winder had died by that point. So this is Crazy Zalba ball. Find the tag. Crazy Zalba ball in the Herbst Son. I have no idea how you pronounce that. I don't know if you can even see that. Herbston. So I'm focusing. I'm not sure. Sorry if you can't see that. Herbs. Yeah. Oranges and blues. He liked this colour, and when I showed it to him, he kind of gravitated toward this one. And I asked him if he'd like me to make socks out of this for him, and he said yes. So these will become socks for him. He doesn't know I'm making them for his birthday, but he knows I will eventually make this into socks for him. And to be honest, he doesn't come in here and look at my yarn very often to be able to know if I'm knitting with it or not. And I'll be knitting on these this week whilst he's away. I'll explain about that in a bit as well. But I really love this project bag. This project bag was made for me by my friend Mel in Dubai, who I went to iKnit with. So if you saw my pictures from that, you'll have seen some pictures of her. And I have to say, I think it's really cute. It's a Sock Monkey sock project bag, and it's one of those 2 at a time project bags. It's really cute and it's so adorable. And I have to say, it did take me several hours after she gave it to me before I realised the joke that it's a Sock Monkey sock project bag. We were at our knitting meetup, and I had a moment of, oh, I get it now, about 3 hours later, which was kind of funny, but also kind of embarrassing for me too, that it took me so long to figure it out. Anyway, next up is knit along news. So we've got the Sunrays Cal, which at the moment is running until the 23rd of August, but I'm thinking that I'm going to extend that deadline by a couple of weeks, because I know there are a few people who are still knitting on theirs and were worried that they might not finish in time. So I want to give everyone as much of an opportunity to enter as possible, because I think there are six items in the finished objects thread at the moment, which is great, and they all look beautiful. But I also want to give those who are still knitting on it, and there are quite a few people who are knitting this shawl and it's their first lace project, so I want to give them as much time as possible to actually be able to finish it. And if there is anyone who wants to jump in now and start, and you'll still have time to enter. So I'm thinking of extending that by a couple of weeks, maybe to like around maybe say the 10th of September. I'll confirm a date and I'll put it in the show notes and on the Ravelry thread for the knit along, so you can check it out there if you want to know the new end date. And I'll reconfirm it again next week when I record. I just had a moment where I can't remember in my head what the dates are. And then we've got the Rainbow Knit Along, which ends on the 30th of September, and that is currently ongoing. There are some beautiful projects being shared in the finished objects thread and in the chatter thread, and yeah, so much fun. So please come along, share your projects. I've said before, if it thinks it's a rainbow, it counts. It's really supposed to be a fun knit along, just have fun with it really. And all inclusive, whips allowed, spinning, crochet, all sorts allowed. I did have another idea for a short knit along, as it were, just a 1 month knit along for the month of September. I don't know what you guys think about this. I have a couple of sort of prize packages of goodies that people have donated for prizes that I haven't assigned to one of these other knit-alongs already. And I was kind of thinking it'd be fun to do something for September, just for the month of September. And I'll explain why. I have quite a few socks and shawls planned to be knit in September. The reason for that will be clear in a minute. But September's going to be quite a travel intensive month for me, as it turns out. So I'll be knitting a lot of socks, because socks are really great for traveling. I've got a new shawl design that I'm working on, so I'll be knitting on shawls as well. So I was thinking shawls, socks, September, an S-along. Knit anything that is an S item, a shawl, socks, sweaters, whatever you want that's S, an S item as it were, in the month of September. And also September's my birthday month, so I thought it would be fun to have something around that as well. So let me know what you think. Do you think that'd be a fun idea, or is that just not a good one? But so let me know if there is some interest. Let me know in the comments thread of the let me know in the episode thread for this episode on Ravelry if you think that would be a good idea, if you'd like to do an S-along or in September or not. And we don't have to if you're not interested, but it was just a thought. So let me know what you think. So moving on, sewing and Mina Makes sort of update on stuff. I've done a bit of sewing this week, not as much as I'd intended. I kind of got a bit carried away with all the knitting and designing and stuff this last week and getting the pattern ready for this to be test knit. I pretty much knit the whole shawl. I'd taken notes and had roughed out a pattern on paper, but I had to write everything up in a format other people would understand, not just me. So that took up quite a bit of my time this week. So I didn't get quite as much sewing done as I'd intended. I've got about a third of the bags ready for the shop. A lot of the bags that I've got ready at the moment are, I think, mostly just the small size bags. So I've got all the drawstring bags still to finish and all the medium and large size bags that I had prepped and ready to go to be finished. So I'm hoping to get those done this week. As I said, Perry's away this week, so I should have a lot more time for sewing. So my plan is still to have a shop update at the end of this week, hopefully at the weekend. But I'll let you guys know more about that on the Ravelry group and on Instagram, so keep an eye out there. And now I guess we move on to acquisitions, which is really fun this week. Got some really, really fun things in the mail. First up, actually this came second, but it was on top of the other things, so I'm doing this one first. It was this package from the Netherlands, and this is now the third package I've had that's been opened by customs in Bahrain when it's arrived, hence the customs sellotape at the bottom there. I'm covering the address of the person who sent it to me. And this was actually sent to me by Caroline of the Zazu podcast, who's Woolbox on Instagram and Ravelry, and it's Zazu Yarns on Etsy is her shop. And she sells, she hand dyes and sells her hand dyed yarns on Etsy. And we did a swap for some. She sent me yarn and I sent her some of my project bags. So in her package to me, she sent a couple of her little minis of her yarn and a little sample of Rapture Eucalan Soak, which is awesome. I've not tried the Rapture wool wash, so that should be interesting. Sorry about all the crinkling, but I just haven't taken these out of the package yet. They look so cute and her tags are so adorable. And then she also sent me, I will open this one. She sent me some lovely tea, some Dutch tea. And she also sent me stripper waffles. I love these. She actually sent me 4. I've eaten 3 of them already. She did say in her note that she sent me that she threw in some for Perry, but luckily for me, Perry doesn't like stripper waffles, so I ate them all. They're all for me, and I don't mind. nor does he. So yeah, there were 4 of these and I've eaten 3 of them already, but they are my favourites. When I was still in Dubai, the knitting group that I went to, a bunch of the ladies would meet up on a Thursday morning at a coffee shop, a Dutch coffee shop, and I went a couple of times towards the end before I left, and they went there so often that the owners would, they'd bring out sometimes they'd bring out some plates of these little waffles or some like little Dutch pancakes. Just really nice. Just reminds me of them, so love these things. And to top it all off, and I haven't even opened this yet, but she sent me these 2 skeins of yarn. So beautiful. And I realised I probably should have opened this to show you guys. Give me 1 second. Grab some scissors. And I'll open these up really quickly so I can show you what they look like. Apologies, I really should have done this before. So the first skein she sent me is this. It's really beautiful. It's so soft. This is her berry yogurt colourway. You can see that there. These beautiful shades of sort of like a fuchsia pink and purple with lighter shades of the same on a cream base. And I don't know how well the camera's picking it up or not, but you can see the sparkle. This one has some stellina in it. So I'm not sure what this is going to be yet. This might be socks, might be a shawl. I haven't fully decided, but it's really beautiful. It's really lovely. I mean, I know I'm not a big pink person, but this probably won't be something I'll knit for myself. I had this in mind as a gift for somebody to knit for someone else. So I do think it's really pretty though. And this one, which I really like as well, is called Magic Dust. Really beautiful shades of purple. This one will be for me because I love purple. And even with the slightly pinker shades, I think it all really works well together. I really, really like this one. Yeah, purple's definitely more my colour, in my opinion. I know some people have said pink suits me as well, but I don't know. I've always been a bit funny about the colour pink. I think it's the gender stereotyping that kind of really gets me on the colour. It's not, and I am developing more of an appreciation for pink as time goes on, but it's still one of those colours that I'm a little bit wary of. The next thing came in this amazing box, and I've covered up the addresses and stuff with stickers so you can't see, but this amazing box of goodies arrived, and there's actually stuff in here for you guys as well as part of there's a little prize in here for the rainbow knit along. But first I'll show you what she sent me, and this is also from another lady called Caroline from the Netherlands. So I got 2 packages from the Netherlands, both from hand dyers, both called Caroline. It's been very much a Dutch week around here. She sent me this beautiful card, which I really love. Knit happens. Totally does. And then I also sent her some bags in exchange for yarn. But so she sent me, this is one of her sort of what do you say, like mistake skeins, ones that didn't turn out quite how it was intended to. And this one is in the heather colorway. Again, this is a glitter base. But this was one she'd already had caked up, so she asked me if I prefer the cake or a skein. I said cake is fine. And this is a nice sort of glittery base. Again, this will probably become socks for a gift. It's 95% merino and 5% lurex. Okay, so maybe not socks, maybe a fun sock head hat actually, because that would be quite fun. And then she also sent me this one, which is Wildwoods, and this is 75% wool and 25% polyamide. 100 grams is 420 meters. Sorry, and I forgot to mention, this is she has an online shop, Colourful Creativity by Caroline, and I'll link her shop in the show notes. It's really beautiful.
I love the colours, the blues and the greens, the little touch of brown. It's really nice. And this one is called Sienna Desert, and I thought this is just too perfect. Lovely yellows and oranges, hints of like a reddy rusty brown there, which is really nice. I really like that colour, that sort of rust colour. Little hints of green in there as well. It's really lovely sort of tonally colour, and this is also 75% wool, 25% polyamide. Although this one feels a little bit more rustic than this one. I'm not sure what the difference is between them, but this one feels more rustic, more like a Regia type. Not bad at all, nothing wrong with that. And this is another one of her cards. She also does stitch markers. So she sent me a stitch marker necklace. It's a necklace, but it's got stitch markers on it, so you can, if you're ever out and about and you need a stitch marker for your project, you've got one handy. So there are two that are like progress keepers with the lobster claws, and one which is a regular stitch marker. So there's the cupcake, that's the regular stitch marker, and there's a yarn ball and needles, and then this beautiful blue beaded one, which is really lovely. Thank you so much, Caroline, for that. And that wasn't even all she sent me more. I can't believe how much stuff she sent me. She sent me this, which I'm all out together and show you. Rainbow minis. She sent me rainbow minis. It's so awesome. This is just perfect. I love them. There's 8 colours there. I haven't quite decided what I'm doing with these yet, but that'll be fun. That's also on her wool polyamide sock blend. But then she also sent me a couple teas to try. There's one, it's Higher Living, organic herb infusion, and there's another one, which is loving green tea, cinnamon and Earl Grey. It says it in English on the back. So those will be interesting to try. She also sent me 2 of these strooper waffles. I ate one already. That's the other one, which I haven't eaten yet because I wanted to show you guys. Then she sent something for you guys. She sent another set of rainbow minis and a set of necklace stitch markers, and this one has two of the beaded kind and one of the yarn ones. And again, I think this one has 2 that are lobster claw and 1 that is a regular stitch marker, I believe, from what I can see. Yeah. So these will be part of one of the prize packages for the Rainbow Cow. I believe I'm still waiting for one more thing to come in the mail, and then I can finalize what the prize packages are going to be, and I can show you guys. So hopefully that last thing will arrive soon, then I can figure out how that's all going to work out. There will be at least 3 prizes for the Rainbow Knit Along, and depending on how many people enter, I may throw something else in as well. Let me move that over there and out of the way. So that covers acquisitions, which turned out to be quite a bit more than I thought. I seem to say that every week, but it's true. Right, so questions and answer section. You guys came up, loads of you had comments about what your favourite cast on and bind offs were last week, after last week's episode. Really popular ones were the German twisted cast on and the tubular cast on, both of which I haven't tried yet, so I will have to try those out soon. Bind offs, what I call the knit 2 together or the laced bind off, or some people call it the Russian bind off, is also quite popular. That's where you start it out with, you sort of knit 2 stitches, then you knit those 2 that you've just knit through the back loop, and then you knit one more, knit the 2 together through the back loop. So that actually gives you quite a nice stretchy bind off, and that's the bind off I used on my shawl. So you see it gives you a bit of stretch, definitely more stretch than you get on a regular bind off. which is just perfect for this shawl. And this is after it's been blocked, it's still got that stretch to it. Then Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off was also quite popular, and that's one that I really like to use when you need stretch, like on a collar or on the cuffs of a sweater or the hem. Those sorts of situations, I will always use the Jenny Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off, because I like it. It gives a quite nice, neat finish if you do it properly, which means you have to actually pull it quite tight. Then quite a few people just do the regular bind off, but I find that I bind off too tight by doing the regular bind off, so that just doesn't work for me. There was one person who commented, and I can't remember who it was now, I didn't write it down, who commented saying that they have issues with the long tail cast on with estimating how much yarn they need. I saw something a while back online, I'm just preparing some sample yarn to show you, which was quite good at a good way to estimate how long a tail you need for a long cast on. So say you need to cast on 200 stitches for something and you want to know how much of a tail you need to leave. You kind of start with just your needle that you're going to use and your yarn, and you leave your 6-inch tail that you normally leave for weaving in ends, and then you just wrap the yarn around the needle 25 times, for example. So let's just say that's 25 times wrapped around the needle. Then you sort of take that off, and you're like, and then you've got your 6-inch tail. Like, that's how much you need for 25 stitches. So then you can just double it up, and then you'll know when you doubled it up enough to get to the count to 200, then you know, okay, well that's how much of a tail I need for 200 stitches. You throw in your slip knot and cast on. And with that method, you actually end up with a little bit overestimating ever so slightly. But I figure when you're trying to cast on 200 stitches, or however many, if it's a large number, you'd rather overestimate than underestimate and then have to rip it all, and then start the cast on all over again. That's just a little tip. Just wrap the yarn around your needle like 20 times or whatever, and then if you need to cast on 100, then you just sort of like double that up 3-4 times so you get to the 100 count and cast on. That's always worked for me. So thought a little tip for you guys there. I don't know if that was very clear at all. If it wasn't, let me know. I'll try and find a video on YouTube to help with that. There were no new questions this week in the questions and suggestions thread on Ravelry. So if you do have any questions, do let me know. And if not, that's fine too. I have several questions for you guys this week. Number 1 question. Ball winders. Anyone recommend a good ball winder that doesn't cost a fortune? Yeah, one that actually winds your ball into a nice cake. I did find one actually that I wanted to get, but I can only get it on Amazon.com. It's the US Amazon, which is fine, I can order it, but it converts, and it wasn't too expensive. It was like £25 or something is what it would have converted to in pounds. But they were going to charge me £28 for shipping. I was just like, really don't like the idea of paying more than what the actual item is worth just to ship it. But that's just the issue with getting stuff shipped from the US on Amazon to here, and if I get it sent to the UK, then there's customs to deal with. So I don't want my parents to have to deal with that for me. So I don't know, does anyone have any good recommendations of ball winders that I can get? Any recommendations of places to get them in New York, preferably, because I'm going to be there in a few weeks. I can get one. Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out that one for now. So if anyone has any good recommendations, just let me know. Let me know your thoughts. Second question, let me know your thoughts on the idea of doing a September knit along. You guys like that idea? Do you think that's crazy? Let me know. I figure we all knit lots of socks and shawls and stuff anyway. May as well have an opportunity to win something for it. Oh, that was it. There was a member of our Ravelry group who started a thread called Introduction and Beginner Question. She introduces herself, her name is Becky, and she introduces herself and she says that she's able to do the basics sort of knit, purl, knit two together and bind off. And you know, she remembers that from when she was younger and when she first learnt to knit, and she really wants to do more. and she's asking for some ideas on some good beginner patterns that may sort of help teach new skills. So I wanted to put the question out there to you guys this week. What are your suggestions for good beginner patterns for people who want to start branching out from, from the very basics, and good patterns that teach you new skills? I realized that when I was learning, I just jumped in at the deep end. One of my very first projects was a lace project, and I made a ton of mistakes in it, but my mum loves it, and I've turned it into a cowl and she wears it all the time. But my point is, I didn't really go through the whole, this is a beginner pattern, then let's move on. I kind of just jumped in at the deep end, and I just knit whatever I liked and sort of messed it up and learned it as I went along, and that was just what worked for me. I know some people really like to learn in stages and gradually introduce more difficult patterns. So if you guys have any good sort of tips or suggestions for a good sort of just beyond the basics beginner patterns, sort of like I said, patterns that will help teach you new skills, then please post them to that thread on the Ravelry group, to the one that Becky started. Her name is Becky345 on Ravelry, and the thread is on the group there, so go check that out and leave any tips or suggested patterns for her there, and for anyone else who's interested. And my final question for you guys this week is, did you set yourselves any knitting goals for this year? Was 2015 a year for learning to knit socks? Was it a year for learning to knit garments? What was your goal for this year? For me, my knitting goals for this year were to knit more garments and to knit more socks. I started knitting socks last year. I knit one pair of socks in 2014, but there again, I did start them in December, so I think I did all right. But this year's literally been the year of socks for me, with my Pondalong socks. This is pair number 14. With this, I've now knit 14 adult socks this year, so that's pretty awesome, and I've still got plenty more to go. I already have one more on the needles and 2 more planned to knit, and even more after that. And my other goal was about knitting more garments. I knit a few garments last year, I believe. I'm trying to remember now. I think I knit at least 3 or 4 garments last year. This year I've now knit 5. I knit a first one I knit this year was called, can't remember the name of it now. I showed it in my very first episode. It's a green one. Can't remember. Its name has just completely failed me. But I knit a cardigan, a worsted weight cardigan. Then I knit a I think it was the jumper for my brother, the Trooper jumper sweater. Then I knit my Stripes Gone Crazy cardigan. I knit the Persistence is Key cardigan, and I knit my dad's Raglan sweater jumper. That's 5. And I want to knit at least 1 more this year. I think my aim will be 6 for 2015. I think 6 sweaters or 6 garments a year is probably good, because that's like 1 every 2 months. I think that's good. My aim is to do 1 more this year, which is the Marco Polo, which I really want to have that done before we go to Iceland, because I think it'd be quite fun to wear that there, considering the yarn I'm planning on knitting it in is from Iceland, so but that would be quite fitting. And I have my next 2 or 3 cardigan sweaters planned already in my head, and I've got the yarn for them, so those will be coming up next year as well. I think that's good. I think I'll probably carry that one on till next year, trying to do 6 garments next year as well. But what about you guys? Do you guys have any sort of knitting goals this year? Did you set any? Did you surpass any? Are you still working towards them? What are they? Where are you at? How are you doing? Yeah, let me know. I think that's quite interesting to hear what other people's plans and goals are with knitting sometimes. And with that, I will move on to week in review. It's not been a particularly interesting week this week, I have to say, nothing particularly interesting has happened. It's really windy outside right now. Just trees are like all over the place. I was making dinner the other night and I was grilling up a bunch of chicken. And back when the boys were little, they used to really like chicken. I would just grill up some plain chicken breasts and cut them up for them, and they would love it. They'd be all over that, and they just sort of like circling my feet as I was preparing it. But as they got older, they just sort of fell out of interest. They fell out of love with it. They didn't like it as much. In general, they're quite fussy. They're all over the seafood, but they hate salmon. They're not a big fan of poultry. Not a big fan of like chicken or duck or turkey. They hate turkey. They won't even touch the stuff. Duck and chicken they'll eat a bit, but salmon and turkey, they just literally turn their noses up at it and walk away. Always, ever since they were kittens. I don't know what it is. But yeah, anyway, the other night I was making chicken and suddenly Derek popped up and he was just sort of looking at me like, yeah, I want some. So I cut up some chicken for both of them, and Derek was a bit unsure. Hugo went straight for it. He was like, yeah, okay, I like this. And Derek was a bit unsure at first. He sort of just like sniffing it as I was holding it. He took a couple of licks of it and he was like, okay, this isn't bad. So I put it on the floor for him. He sort of like sniffed it again and sort of sat up and just looked at me. I was just like, what is this? Anyway, so I bent down and I picked it up and I sort of held it up for him again. He is such a spoiled little cat. I picked it up and I held it for him. And he sort of licked it again, sniffed it, and this time he grabbed it and then sort of like just trotted off to find a corner where he could eat it in peace. He's such a little princess, he wouldn't even eat it off the floor. I put it in his food bowl and he still wouldn't eat it. I had to pick it up and give it to him. So, he's such a spoiled little baby. But he's my baby, so it's okay. Again, about making dinner the other night, Perry was helping me in the kitchen, and I was gonna, what I do a lot of the time, or I used to do a lot of the time, was I would boil the kettle. I'd fill the kettle up with water, I'd boil it, and I'd just put that straight into the pan to cook rice or pasta. It's just much quicker than waiting for the pan to boil on the hob. But we went to do that the other night, and Perry was like, well, why don't you just turn the tap on the tap in the sink? And I was like, okay, good point. Our water is so hot at the moment. The cold water comes out scalding hot, to the point where I was filling up the pan and I couldn't hold the pan in my hands. I had to use the handles because it was getting so hot. The water was steaming out of the tap. You could have brewed tea with that water. It was so hot. Yeah, it's crazy. It's just our kitchen, the tank that feeds our kitchen, I think is the worst one. The other day I had a shower and it was on the cold setting the whole time. It was really hot. I'm looking forward to the winter when it cools down a bit and I don't have to worry about burning myself when I'm going to wash my hands. We found another gecko in our house. So that makes 3. We have 2 adult-ish geckos, I guess, that live in my craft room, it seems. And then we spotted a baby gecko in our living room the other night, and he spent the last 3 days just running laps around our living room up by the ceiling. So every time I go in, he's like somewhere else, but he's always up there. And the boys spotted him. Like Hugo spotted him one night and he was just like sat there staring. And then Derek spotted him the other night and he was just on the cat tree just staring at this thing up on the ceiling. But he's doing okay, and the boys are only interested in anything that moves. They're not really going to hurt it, I don't think. So yeah, baby gecko makes 3. We've got a family of geckos living in our house now. Thankfully they're not dangerous or harmful to us, and if anything they're probably quite handy to have around. They eat bugs, so I'm more than happy for them to hang around. Perry's off to London tonight. I'll be taking him to the airport later this evening. He's off for the next leg of his course, so he'll be gone for a week. He won't be back till next week on Monday. So it'll be sad not having him around, but I actually do find when he's not here I do get a lot more stuff done, probably because I get more stuff done in the evening, because when he's home I tend to do less. I want to hang out with him and spend time with him, whatever we're doing, so I tend not to do as much of my own thing, which is fine, and I obviously I would rather spend time with him, but when he's not around it does mean I get a lot more done, so I'm hoping to get more of my sewing done this week.
We have, like I said, as it turns out, the latter part of this year is going to be incredibly travel intensive for both of us. Not really intended to be like that initially, but it seems to be what it's turning into. We, starting with obviously our upcoming New York trip in September, we actually have I don't think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, but we have a couple of days stopover in London on the way over. It's my dad's birthday. I already mentioned that. I think it's his 60th birthday this year. So we've sort of worked it out so that we can be in London for a couple of days over the weekend, closest to his birthday, to see him. And so he doesn't know we're going. So that's going to be, he knows we're going to New York, but he doesn't know we're going to be stopping in London long enough to come and see them. So my mum knows. My mum's the only one who knows from my family, but Perry's family knows we're coming as well. I've organised like a family sort of lunch get together for everyone. So that should be fun. Looking forward to that. Then obviously got New York, and then later in the month there's another Eid coming up, and this is one they refer to as Big Eid. It's Eid al-Adha, and it's also Saudi National Day. They both happen to end up happening in the same week. So Saudi National Day is on the 23rd of September, and I believe Eid this year actually falls on the 24th of September, which is also my birthday. So Perry's going to have a nice decent chunk of time off work around then, and we've decided to go away for a few days just to relax and make the most of the fact that he has some time off. It's not time off that we've booked, it's time off that he gets anyway, because the company's going to be closed for a week or whatever. So we booked a holiday, really nice place we're going to Oman, to Muscat. And we've been there before a couple of years ago, and we stayed at this really lovely hotel. It's called the Shangri-La, and it's really lovely. And they had a really good deal on actually for that week, so we got a really good deal for it. Like I said, we'd been there before. We'd stayed for 2 nights last time, and it has to be by far the most relaxing place we had ever stayed. And remember when we were there, we were both like, we really want to come back here someday. And we wanted to do this trip, and we've got a really busy last few months of the year coming up. And like I've said before, we're not really the kind of sit by the pool, do nothing all day kind of people. But at this place that we went to, it was so lovely and so relaxed. We just really enjoyed unwinding there. And we'd said we'd like to go back there again someday. And we were looking at other options first. Like, honestly, that wasn't the first thing we looked at. We looked at going to other places. We looked at going to Europe maybe, or whatever. And nothing really sort of worked. We didn't want to spend too much money on it either, because we were only going to be able to go for 4 or 5 days. So we were looking at like city breaks or something. But nothing was going to work out to be both sort of like with the flights working out. We were either going to end up spending like a ridiculous amount of time flying and taking connections and whatever, versus how much time we were actually going to be at the destination. All the hotels we were looking at, or places we were looking at to stay, were just extortionate for that time of the year, and none of it seemed to be working. And we were like, well, why are we trying so hard? It was one of those situations where it felt like we were just throwing money at the problem, and it just wasn't working, didn't feel right. So we decided to scrap all that, and we looked into Oman. It's a 1.5 hour flight, if that even. It's about a 1 hour flight. It's close. It means we get the most amount of time, most of our time spent there. We know the weather will be lovely, and we know we really like the place. So that's what we've ended up doing, and I'm really looking forward to it now. It should be really fun, really lovely, relaxing sort of few days away. So that should be good. And then we've got obviously London and Iceland at the end of the year, but there's potentially another trip. Perry's going to New York again for another leg of his course in November, and I potentially may be joining him on that trip. Potentially. I haven't fully figured that one out yet, but once I do, I'll let you guys know, because if I do go with him on that trip, we'll be going to somewhere else as well. So anyway, so that's pretty much sums up this week. Right, I better get going. I think I've sort of just rambled on quite a lot there towards the end. I'm really sorry. Anyway,
thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for stopping by. And if you do have any questions for me, please let me know. Answer the questions I asked you guys this week in the comments for this episode thread. And yeah, have a lovely week. I hope to speak to you guys again next time. Bye.